All right, I think we're good to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name's Hallie, and I'm a member of the Quad Education team. Welcome to our webinar on applying to STEM programs, Expert Insights. We have two of our fantastic consultants here with us who are going to walk us through what applying to a STEM program looks like, how to make your application stand out, and then answer any questions that you have at the end of the webinar. For those of you that don't know, Quad Education is an admissions consulting company, and we work with students and families through the entire application process, from choosing classes and extracurriculars in early high school all the way through deciding what schools you want to apply to, filling out your application, writing your personal statements, taking the SAT and ACT, all the way through you deciding which school that you're going to attend. All right, so today we're gonna have our panelists introduce themselves. We'll talk about what STEM programs are. We'll talk about some of the top STEM schools in the country. We'll go over what those programs generally are looking for in applicants. We'll talk about how you can showcase your academic and extracurricular experiences and why that's important. We'll go over some expert tips and tricks, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have questions through this, pop those in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end. Additionally, we are recording this and we'll send this out via email within the next few days. You have access to it later on as well. So we have Jennifer and Dominique here with us today. Jennifer, can you introduce yourself for us?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for making the time to be with us today. My name's Jennifer, and I graduated from Harvard, then undergraduate, and went to Japan for my postgraduate work, then directed study abroad programs at universities and colleges across the US for many years before directing a college guidance program at a private secondary institution in my home state of Maryland, and where I also directed the IB program, and then joined Quad a few years ago and really enjoy working individually with students to help you find your ideal school. I'm looking forward to talking with you this evening.
Thanks so much for being here, Jennifer. It's great to have you. And Dominique, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Dominique. I graduated from Dartmouth College undergrad. During my time at Dartmouth, I worked with the admissions office as a tour guide. And then after graduating, I worked as an alumni interviewer. So interviewing prospective students kind of from the alumni perspective and then sending my feedback back to the admissions committee. After I graduated from Dartmouth, I went into public education for a number of years where I worked with middle school and high school students and kind of coaching them and advising them through this process. And now I'm working with Quad in a more kind of one-on-one capacity with students to just coach them through, what it takes to figure out which type of college you might like, build that list, and then, eventually put your best foot forward in the application. I'm super excited to be here tonight and to talk to you all about STEM programs.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here, Dominique. All right, so let's just dive right in here and talk about what are STEM programs. I'm sure this is a word everyone has heard a million times, but we'll dive into the specifics here. Jennifer, you want to start us off?
Sure. Just to define the acronym, we've got science represented by the natural, physical, and life sciences, technology with computers and related disciplines, data science, informatics, and the like, engineering, all kinds of engineering, a really fascinating field of study, especially for students who like to explore hands-on kind of applied learning, and math. Applied math included statistics and related fields.
So here's some examples of STEM majors that you might come across.
All right. Yeah. So these are the kind of 10 main types of STEM majors that you may come across in your research and in your college experience. And so we have astronomy, biology, chemistry, computer science, engineering, earth sciences, health sciences, information technology, mathematics, and physics. Obviously, many of you know there are kind of subdivisions within a lot of these specific majors. And so a biology major, you may have someone that's really interested in ecology and focuses in on that. And so that's like plants and animals. Whereas you may have someone else that's really interested in kind of maybe like a medical focused type of biology. So you're talking biochemistry, anatomy and physiology, those types of courses. And so a lot of schools will actually allow you to not only kind of specialize in one specific area as your major, but there are some schools where they'll actually let you kind of create your own major. And so if there were specific kind of subdivisions of any of these types of majors that you were particularly interested in, you may be able to combine them to kind of create your own, special major that's related to the cross section of a couple of these different STEM subjects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing to see recently is a trend towards interdisciplinarity. So you'll see an increasing number of majors like biophysics or computational biology or all kinds of combinations of these various fields. And the other thing to know when you're looking at different schools is that majors hide in different divisions of the school. And so sometimes it's like a treasure hunt to find the major that you're interested in, but we can definitely help you do that.
All right, let's talk about some of the top STEM schools in the country.
So when you're thinking of top STEM schools, these are probably some of those that come to mind: MIT, Caltech, Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, and others, with their accompanying acceptance rates at 6% and below. These schools are incredibly focused on research, and it is super important to be aware that to be a competitive applicant at these schools, you need to have conducted your own research. Some of our students who are successful applicants to these schools have developed their own devices or apps or other things that they may have even gotten a patent on. Some students have founded their own biotech companies in high school. It's really quite incredible, the range of ambition and skill and talent that is out there. And it's important to channel that early in a focused direction if you have your sights set on these schools. And when you're thinking back to your days at college or what you're familiar about from the college application cycle that you may have gone through here or abroad, things are very different now, and it's not enough to just have good grades. You have to have a whole lot else going for you when you're looking at these kinds of top STEM schools.
And I think we can also point out that while these are some of the top schools in the country for STEM, they're not the only STEM schools, and you can get an amazing STEM education other places as well. All right. So what are STEM programs looking for? Jennifer, you just covered this a little bit, but let's dive in here as well.
Awesome. So this slide actually really applies to any type of program, but it also does apply to STEM programs. Most colleges and universities take a really holistic approach to admissions. And so what that means is they are looking at you as a complete package, as a whole person, right? So it's not just your grades and your test scores, are they quote unquote smart enough to come here? It's, do you have good grades? Have you shown that you have a good enough work ethic to come to this school where you'll be able to keep up with the rigorous coursework? Do you have good test scores? And in some cases, test scores are weighted more than others. The way things have been going these last few years, they're putting actually a little bit less emphasis on test scores, but even so, test scores are just one piece of the application. And even if you are applying to a test optional school and you are submitting those scores, that is, again, just one piece of the application. And so it's not ever going to make or break you. But then there's all of these other pieces that, really kind of play a role to set you apart from people who have maybe the same very high test scores and the same very high grades. When we're talking about especially these top 5 schools, your Harvards, your Stanfords, et cetera, most students who are getting into these schools are already going to have very close to a 4.0 GPA, very close to, perfect 99th percentile test scores. That's not enough. You can have all of that and still not get in because you haven't done something else to set you apart, like as to who you are as a person. And so this includes recommendation letters, right? Can someone speak to your character? Can a teacher or a mentor say, hey, yes, they're super smart, they're super dedicated, they have great test scores, they've done it all, but they're also the kindest person in the room, or they're the most helpful, or they're the most honest, whatever it is, right? Are you a good person? That goes a long way, and that will shine through in a recommendation letter from a teacher. Also, extracurricular activities, right? I think a big, I guess, trap that some students potentially fall into is thinking that they just need to do everything, be president of everything, leader of everything. I do all the clubs. That is actually not as beneficial to you as doing maybe 1, 2, 3 things very, very well, and really tell a compelling story about why you love that thing, or what kind of contribution you've made to that group, to that community, whatever it may be. That'll go a lot further. When we talk about holistic admissions, I think that, something that just shines through in an application is how genuine you're being, quite honestly. And so if you can speak genuinely about 2 extracurriculars that you absolutely love and just spend all your time doing, that will go way further than saying, I've done these 10 things, but I don't really love them. And even if you say you love them, if you don't have the true evidence to back that up, here's what I've done, here's how I've contributed, that's just going to weaken your application. And so all of those things will come together to bring together your application. I think the one thing I left out was like essays. And so you'll have a personal narrative, you'll have supplemental essays where you'll have to talk about potentially, why do you want to go to this school specifically? And tell me about that extracurricular that you absolutely love. Can you write about it more than just the, 1 sentence description that you write in the activities section? And so being able to tell a story about yourself and being comfortable and confident in that is a huge piece of this as well. I don't know if there's anything that you have to add.
Nope.
All right. This seems a little bit intimidating to apply to STEM programs, especially top tier STEM programs, but I think they're designed for that. And we can also help you through that and help you plan your years in high school to help you get to a spot where you're a competitive applicant in those programs. Academic requirements and GPA expectations.
So as Dominique mentioned, most students who are successful applicants to the most rigorous STEM programs back up their interest with really high performance, and as shown in your grades, and then also as shown in the rigor of the courses that you've selected. It's not really advisable to just take AP courses for the sake of taking AP courses. Like I've had some students, well, I should take like 12 or 15, or they're focused on a number, but we want you to be thinking about which courses your school offers, which ones make sense for you. And then you also have to balance the challenge of taking a more rigorous course load with how you're going to perform academically. If you take on a load that's too heavy in AP coursework, and your grades suffer, that's going to be, in some cases, less desirable than if you had a more balanced approach. So we really want you to be thinking about playing to your strengths and focusing in on those areas that are going to be most advantageous to you in preparing your individual profile as you focus in on your application strategy for college and university. So it's kind of a given that you're going to be strong in these areas, that you're going to have worked hard in your math courses and advanced to a very high level, especially if you're considering engineering. They want to see that you've maxed out the coursework at your school and maybe even enrolled in a community college or college course near your home, that you've been able to pursue even more advanced subjects, multivariable, linear, whatever it may be, that are going to serve you well on your path to engineering. If you're tracking for the natural sciences, it's important to have done that in your discipline. And you want to show that you have strong math scores and skills as well, but it may be a little bit less relevant depending on which field of study that we outlined earlier you're tracking for.
Anything else to add here, Dominique?
I don't think so. I think, just like what I mentioned before, right? Like you can have all of this, but this oftentimes is not enough to set you apart. So it's like the way I see it is kind of like this is a prerequisite. And to say that there's never a cutoff, I think we get that question a lot. Is there a cutoff? Like, is there a GPA where I just won't be considered? No. But if you go online, you can look up pretty easily kind of the middle range of students and what their GPA and what their test scores look like. You can get a sense of, am I a good fit for this school? Am I the type of student with the type of GPA that they're looking for? So there's never like they're going to throw my application out the window because I don't hit a certain GPA, but it definitely, there's just kind of certain standards that your odds are much, much better if you hit that, especially for competitive schools.
We do have a webinar we did a few weeks ago that's on our website. You can go take a look at that talks about how admissions are decided. And it goes a little bit into this, but also talks about how a school that is accepting 1,000 students a year, how they're looking at applications and some things that might go into their decisions when they have tens of thousands of applicants that they need to weed through, many of whom have kind of the same grades, the same top test scores. Unfortunately, it's not as cut and dry as I've met these expectations, so you can get in. And we also will talk about this, like ways to boost your application here, but we also have other webinars that talk about specific research projects you can take on and how to go about doing that as well. All right, standardized tests and their weight in admissions. This is something we talk about a lot, especially with schools being the majority of schools being test optional.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is something I just recently mentioned. So standardized tests, they play kind of a piece in this holistic admissions process. The majority of schools right now, and I believe will continue to be test optional. And so you can choose to submit scores. You can choose to take these tests, or you can choose not to. You can choose to not take it altogether, or you can choose to take it, see how you do, and only submit the score if it's one that you're proud of and one that you want to reflect in your application. That being said, I say the majority of schools are test optional. I'm actually looking at a list right now of schools that are still requiring the SAT, and two of the big ones that I'll just point out. One of them is MIT, which we just talked about. So one of those top 5 STEM schools. And then another one that stood out to me was Purdue University, which is very well known for their engineering programs, right? And so you can see that there are definitely some top STEM programs that still really value this. And, perhaps that's just something that factors into your decision, right? If that's something that you really value, right, being able to perform well on these types of tests, maybe that's the type of school that you want to apply to. If you don't really value these types of tests, maybe that tells you something about, whether you would do well at the school or whether you would like the community or the mindsets or whatever it may be. Another thing to just think about is if you are, if there is a piece of your application, if we're talking holistically, that isn't looking so great for whatever reason, you can use a standardized test to your advantage to kind of fill in that gap, right? And that's usually what I suggest students do. For example, say you really want to go into a STEM major, but your freshman year wasn't so great. You didn't do so well in your math class, and that kind of set you behind. Maybe you did not get to take accelerated math for the rest of the years. You weren't able to go into an AP class because you kind of fell behind in that track because of one year when you were a lot younger, right? Which happens all the time. What you can do is, can you take the SAT or the ACT and really knock the math section out of the park and then say, hey, in 9th grade, I had X, Y, and Z struggles, but now I'm a senior. I have, way better study skills, whatever it may be, and I can do this upper level math, and let me show you my quantitative reasoning skills with this incredible test score, right? And so that's one way to kind of fill gaps in your application when we're talking about the holistic person and their whole story. But again, if you're just the type of person that's like, I get really anxious about test taking and I know this stuff, but sometimes I crack under the pressure and my scores are never as good as I want them to be, right? This could be a way to kind of veer away from that and then just have other parts of your application shine a little brighter.
Yeah. A couple of things I'm thinking of as well here is that sometimes students will ask us, should I take the SAT or ACT? And my answer is take both. Take the PACT, take the PSAT. Find out which test is better suited for you and your unique strengths and where you excel naturally. And then sometimes students will even take the real exam, the regular ACT and the regular SAT, once each to determine which one they want to prep in and ultimately where they're going to perform their best. The other piece of encouragement that I want to offer based on a couple of recent examples of my students is if you struggle with test taking and you suspect that you may have either ADHD, or you know that you do, or you have documented learning disabilities, it's important for you and your family to talk with your school and to secure the accommodations that will enable you to succeed both in your school classes with your GPA and in a standardized testing environment, because you can submit that documentation to the College Board, to the ACT, and arrange for extra time in that test taking space. And then you can perform at your best to guarantee that you're going to be as successful as you can be. It's important to do that early. The process takes some time, it takes some work, but it's really been dramatically helpful to my students who've needed it.
All right, how do you go about showing your academic and extracurricular experiences?
So this is sort of a recap of what we've been discussing, and we want to emphasize that a high GPA is a necessary but not sufficient condition for admission to these programs in universities that we're talking about at the really top level. Your competition is going to have those high scores. And so it's important that you do your best and that you're performing at your top capacity as well. And as I mentioned before, that you're challenging yourself with an academically rigorous program, whether you're taking, biology, physics, chemistry. If you have the option to level up, you want to take the level up option. If you have the option to start early, to do a summer pre-start course, many students going into 9th grade will do a basic level natural science course so they can start at a more advanced level in the 9th grade. Consider if that's going to be a good pathway for you. And then think through dual enrollment courses, IB, AP, whatever extra honors programs that your school offers to really stand out. Increasingly, high schools are offering like a biomedical track, some kind of preparation with internships and research where you have guidance from your school. And so if you see that being offered and that's a direction that you want to consider going in, that's something that's very important to consider academically.
All right, so this next piece is kind of, outside of your regular coursework, what can you get involved to go kind of above and beyond, do a little bit extra. First things first, not all of your extracurriculars need to be STEM related, and they shouldn't be, right? And so this already just links right back to what I was saying before about feeling that pressure to kind of put yourself in that box, or I have to do this to get into college, or I have to do all of these things to get into college, right? You want to show that you're well-rounded, absolutely, right? But you don't have to be well-rounded the same way that the guy next to you is. And actually, you probably shouldn't be, right? Because you want to make yourself stand out. So like truly, 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 just be authentic to yourself. And I know that's easier said than done. But really kind of for me, a rule of thumb is, pick 2, 3, maybe 4, really not always any more than that, very main activities to be involved in. You want hopefully 1 or 2 of them to be very much related to what you're interested in academically. And so if you're interested in STEM, that could be research, that could be some sort of, technology focused internship or something of the like. And then, the other 2 could be whatever you want, sports, music, theater, whatever you really enjoy. You definitely just want to make sure you have some variety, but don't feel like you have to do any certain thing to, get into a STEM program, as long as you're kind of covering the bases with things that feel authentic to you. That's the next bullet point. Always pursue activities you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about them, it will shine through on your application. You're going to be asked to write about these things and potentially speak about them in an interview. So you want to be prepared to be as authentic and enthusiastic as possible to make yourself shine in the best light. And then the biggest thing here, I think, is really showing leadership in these extracurriculars and having some sort of impact on the community that you are in. And so it's not enough to say, you know, I went to this 6-week summer program and I learned all about what it means to be a doctor, right? Like, that's awesome. But in what ways have you kind of taken charge of your own experience, either by stepping up in a leadership role in a club that you're in, or somehow spearheading some sort of initiative, whether it be, you know, a project, a research project, you know, a competition, or whatever it is, to make sure that you are having an impact on the group that you are in. So leadership goes a long way. Impact on the community goes a long way as well.
Great.
And then if we look at some concrete examples of what might this look like for you, there are options for school-based activities, work experience or internships, academic programs, and other kinds of structured programs. So what we think of when we're talking about school-based activities is a science club or competition, and maybe there's Science Olympiad at your school. Maybe your school participates in the local science fair that's going to feed into your state and regional science fairs, that's going to eventually feed into ISEF, the International Science and Engineering Fair, where you really start to get recognized by the top schools. And perhaps your school doesn't offer that. And then you get to demonstrate your own initiative and leadership by bringing a chapter of one of these programs to your school. You need to find a teacher at your school who's willing to support you and serve as an advisor to your school. Find a couple of other like-minded friends who have the same interests as you do, and start your own organization if your school doesn't offer that already. Many students will join robotics. First Robotics Challenge is big. All kinds of other competitions are out there for students with interests in robotics, in electrical engineering, in mechanical engineering, where you get that real hands-on experience and you get to have fun and you get to learn something and you get to refine your interests. Because by the time you're applying to an MIT or a Caltech or a Stanford, you want to know not just, I want to go into mechanical engineering, but I want to do this with it. My interest is in this niche area. This is the experience that I've been able to develop over time. And you have opportunities way early on in high school to do just that at your school and beyond. Maybe your interests are more in math and you can participate in the math competitions that are out there and really showcase your unique math abilities and talents. And perhaps it's a laboratory experiment that you get super excited about at your school, and then you want to do more research and learn more about that particular area that you had an opportunity to do some hands-on work with. Outside of your school, you're going to have a lot of opportunities, if you look for them in the right places, for internships or even work experience. Once you're old enough to be able to do that, there are age requirements, obviously, that are at play here. You can look at startup organizations, and as I mentioned before, many students will actually start their own company that they have organized around an activity or invention or product that they are working on that they're super excited about. Students are launching healthcare, skincare, organic foods, all kinds of interesting things that require a lot of knowledge, both about business and about science that goes into their products. So you can, the world is really open to you, and it's important that you think about what's interesting to you, what causes matter to you. Usually there's a resonance with a personal experience that is going to drive this and kind of sustain you through the process, because it's not an easy road. And there are lots of opportunities to shadow as well. You can look at shadowing in the medical field. You can look at shadowing in the biotech field. Look at family connections, friends of friends, that kind of thing. And some of my students have had a lot of success just cold emailing as well, and finding the right person that is willing to take a chance on them. Academic programs are offered virtually throughout the school year to support independent research or to do online studies. There's CTY through Johns Hopkins, the Center for Talented Youth. Georgetown has a large range of programs that are on offer. There's a ton of online courses available through universities and educational providers, and your quad consultant can help you identify which ones are a really good fit for you and your chosen field. There's a ton of programs that are offered in the summer that can support your emerging interests. Some are class format, and we really encourage you to look beyond that because you're sitting in classes all year. And we want you to have some experiential hands-on opportunities in the summer. So we think that that's a really nice adjunct and add-on to your curricular learning experience during the school year. So that's just a sampling of some of the many kinds of programs that are out there for you.
Great. All right, let's talk about some expert tips on portraying your skills, traits, and passion.
All right, awesome. So we'll talk about portraying your academic skills and showcasing that. Big thing here is STEM-related coursework. So this is not only grades, but AP scores can go a long way here as well. And so, you know, talking a little bit about just kind of the difference between dual enrollment and AP. AP is like College Board branded, very standardized curriculum that's used all across the country. And so when a college sees that you've taken an AP course, they know exactly what curriculum you've covered in your class. And they also know exactly which exam you took and what the difference between a 4, a 5, a 3, whatever it is may be. So they know exactly what you know, exactly what you did, the rigor, all of that. And so that goes a long way. That's one of the very few examples where they can know for sure how to compare apples to apples, essentially, in college admissions, at least between two students who have taken the exact same course. Because as you can imagine, teachers and the way they structure more general courses can very much vary across schools, within schools, et cetera. So all of that said, I've had students come to me and say, you know, should I take dual credit or should I take AP? I would advocate if it's a very generic course like biology, statistics, chemistry, take the AP course because the college will know for sure the level of rigor. And there's just a general kind of regard and respect for what advanced placement has to offer. And then you'll also have that very concrete score at the end with that exam where you can show, hey, here's my level of proficiency. I got a 5. You know what this exam is. It wasn't some random final exam that the local community college professor put together, which very well may be super rigorous and awesome, but they'll just never know. And so, you know, showcase your skills in the most concrete way possible. I would say by choosing AP when it's very straightforward to do so. That being said, I don't want to discredit dual credit programs because there are places where those are such great learning opportunities. So if it's more of like an elective type of course where it's something very specific, where you can get a college level look into biotechnology or anatomy and physiology or something like that, absolutely go for it. And that's another way to showcase your skills and academic achievement. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that because I think that's something that comes up a lot. Advanced and honors classes, just make sure that you emphasize those and you record them correctly on your application itself. And then also your college application will ask you about awards or anything that you've won or anything notable. So make sure that you kind of keep track of any academic awards you get, even if it's something like I was chosen as the best biology student for the year, right? Like that's not maybe as huge as being recognized statewide for something, but it absolutely, you were chosen as one person in your class. So make sure even things that maybe seem small, just write those down. I always encourage my students to keep a spreadsheet of just like little awards and stuff that happens along the way. That way you can keep track of everything as you actually enter it into your college application.
Those are some great tips.
So likewise, as you're going through your high school career, you want to be aiming for leadership roles and showing initiative and like an intellectual kind of approach and engagement to the field of study that you're most interested in. This will be happening through some of the opportunities that we discussed on the earlier slides about science clubs or coding competitions, math competitions, different kinds of robotics teams that are available to you, either at your school or in your community. And you want to be thinking, how can I further my interests, and how can I really stand out in that? How can I combine the interests that I have? You know, if you're tracking for BME, you want to be looking at ways that you can gain knowledge and experience and exposure with the medical field, as well as engineering skills, so that you can present yourself to a biomedical engineering department as a really compelling candidate. If that doesn't exist at your school already, think about how you can start it. You don't only have to work with what is available to you. And then you really want to look at commitment and depth of involvement over time. You really want to look at your role on a team and how you can step into a leadership position. Maybe there's just, you know, an informal leadership role that you can take on. The UC, the University of California system, is really big on this in their application. When they're asking you about leadership, they're not just looking for the president of the student body or the captain of the football team. They're looking for informal kinds of leadership and influence that you've been able to have by taking that initiative and reaching out and thinking creatively about an issue that's important to you that you think should be addressed. So think in those terms as well as you're looking to grow your own leadership skills and experience.
Fantastic. And I appreciate you making that point about leadership doesn't necessarily need to be the president of the club. There's a lot of ways to demonstrate leadership that are not that and are easily achievable and maintainable.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is short and sweet, but so important. Secure, strong recommendations. This is really the only piece of the application, other than like your transcript and stuff, which is pretty much standardized, that is, you know, somebody else is crafting this for you, right? And so there's no, you know, you can't tell a lie on a letter of recommendation. You can kind of potentially really, you know, make your story just sound a little bit more grand than what it maybe is or whatever on your essays. But, you know, your teachers are going to tell the truth about how they feel about you, right? And so you need to make sure you give them a reason to write a really grand, exciting, you know, just truthful, but awesome and positive letter of recommendation about you. And, you know, that being said, it being positive is one thing, but them having countless examples and just plenty to say is another thing, right? And so, you know, there's kind of like three scenarios here. One is that the teacher doesn't really like you. They don't want to write a letter of rec for you, and it's all horrible, which of course is not going to happen to anyone here. We won't talk about that one. But then there's these other two camps you can potentially be in, where one is like, you're an awesome kid, you have great grades, you participate, but that's really it, right? You don't go above and beyond. You don't try to build a relationship with the teacher. You just like have not stood out in any way. And so they'll write a good letter of rec for you. You'll get, you know, the student works very hard. They have straight A's. They always do their homework. They're a pleasure to have in class. They smile at me in the morning, whatever it is. That's one letter of rec, right? And that's like the most common letter of rec. Almost any kid can get that, right? To be that person that stands out, you want to give your teacher just so many little things that they can go in and say, hey, I have this student in my class. They're in office hours every week and they talk to me and they help the person next to them, and just like give them a ton of material that it's so easy for them to say yes and fill up that 1-page letter, right? You don't want to make it challenging for them to find things to say because you haven't made yourself known to this person. And so biggest piece of advice, if you're just starting out in high school or even if you're in middle school, start now, start to build those relationships. You'll never know when you'll have a teacher for the second or maybe third time. You know, I remember that happened to me in high school. I had no idea that I was going to have like the same math teacher 3 years in a row. But sometimes it works out like that, right? And those are some of the best relationships, and they can write some of the best letters of rec because they've seen you grow. And so treat every teacher like they could be that person. You don't know what these relationships are going to grow into. Treat every mentor in the same way. and really just focus on being that person, being helpful, being kind, being honest, being all of, just having character, having integrity, all the things that, make a strong individual that won't necessarily shine through all the time on your application unless someone literally just says those things about you and can tell some awesome stories. That's everything I have here. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
Sometimes in terms of the recommendations, what you're able to do is, in addition to your teachers, you can also ask for additional letters of reference. Depending on the school, they might allow more than 2. And so if you have had someone in a research capacity, in an internship capacity, or a work capacity who can speak to how you interacted and what you contributed to the organization outside of your classroom activities, that can also be really valuable. So keep that in mind as well.
Fantastic. And then one thing I just would love for one of you or both of you to touch on is that you don't necessarily need to be asking a teacher that you've had straight A's in through the entire course of their classes, and you can build relationships through like asking for help and, working on bettering your grades.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I've worked with students where we're trying to choose recommenders and we're having that conversation. Well, what is your experience with this teacher? What is your experience with that teacher? And sometimes I would argue it is almost better to pick a teacher that you struggled with. Maybe you got a B- in their class the first semester and then you got your grade up, because they have a story to tell about you, as opposed to that teacher that just kind of saw you breeze through the class effortlessly and get straight A's. And so, we're going to talk about this in the next slide. It's all about telling a story, right? Admissions reviewers are human beings too. They want to see you as a person, and really the more you can make yourself jump off the page by, oh yeah, I remember that kid. They were the one that really struggled and went to office hours all the time, or they wrote about this for their essay or whatever it is, the better kind of light you're going to be viewed in, because you are going to be interesting to them, right? It's just going to be easier for them to remember you. Obviously, that's not the whole thing. So I don't want to say like, it's an essay contest and whoever writes the best essay definitely gets in, but there's definitely something to be said about telling a compelling story. And your recommenders can do that, play a part in that by really writing about your evolution, your growth over time. And then to segue into the next slide, we can also do that yourself by crafting a compelling personal statement that tells about your story and evolution. And I'll pass it off with that.
Exactly. So this is your opportunity to really think through your own journey and your own narrative, and why are you interested in the field that you're interested in. So many of the essays that you'll be writing as a senior talk about exactly that. Not just what do you want to do, why do you want to do it here, but why do you want to do this field in the first place? And when students struggle with those essays, it's because they really haven't thought about it, haven't had a personal experience. Maybe they're feeling forced into a certain area of study by well-meaning relatives or teachers, that there's some kind of expectation that they follow in a tradition, but maybe it doesn't really resonate with them. Some of the most successful narratives come from a personal set of circumstances. Maybe there was an illness that you struggled with, or an accident that you had to overcome, or touched a family member, and that's developed in you a passion to do research in a certain area, whether it's for medicine, whether it's for the uses and applications of computer science in various fields. You want to be thinking about your why. All of us do, right? Why do we do what we do is a common theme for us to be thinking about. So be thoughtful about what are some pivotal moments for you. Why are you being drawn to STEM? It's a competitive field, and you need to have a why that's going to sustain you as you're working through the inevitable challenges that are going to come. Sometimes students are really impacted by your teachers. You may have had a teacher who was particularly gifted in making chemistry or physics intelligible and exciting for you, and you got really energized and enthusiastic about that field. So you want to be, thinking about talking with that teacher outside of class about how they got started in that field and what they love about it, getting to know them outside of just classroom hours. And then you're going to be narrating eventually through your coursework, through your extracurriculars, this idea of why you want to pursue a major in a STEM field and how it connects to your work, to your career beyond, whether you're going forward in engineering, you're going forward to teach at the secondary or university level in a certain field. You want to go into research because you just love being in the lab and you love that process of discovery and innovation, or you're headed for a medical career or a career in public health. There's so many opportunities, and there's so much that's beginning to overlap, where we're seeing, the role of robotics and AI in healthcare and data science, and all of these areas are really intersecting, and it's such an evolving and exciting field to be a part of. So if you like to be part of something that's dynamic and you always need to keep on the forefront of a certain discipline, you'll be really excited about the opportunities that are waiting for you.
Great. All right, so that brings us to all. Feel free to pop some questions into the Q&A box. We have some time to answer some of your questions. One question we have is it true that many colleges don't consider AP exam scores during admission reviews? This might be one we have to get back to you all on in our follow-up email.
I can jump in and speak to this a little bit. This is not something that I have heard of a college saying, we will not accept this or we will not look at this. I think what the person who asked this may be getting at is that some colleges won't give course credit for an AP score, which is a totally different kind of subject here. And so AP scores sometimes in some colleges, they will literally give you a course credit. So say you took AP biology, you got a 4 or a 5 on the exam. Some colleges will say, great, now you don't have to take, biology 101. If you're going to be a biology major, you skip right ahead to the next course in line. You get a credit. A lot of schools will not accept that, and they're going to force you to take biology 101 anyways, even if you've seen a lot of the material in your AP course. As far as admissions itself goes, again, it's just a number. It is something that kind of adds to that whole story of who you are. And so very similarly, I would say to even if you're going to submit SAT scores to a test optional school, most of the time it will be considered as a piece of the puzzle, but it may not necessarily translate to either a credit, or sometimes colleges will let you place out of a class based on your AP score. They may or may not do that. But again, it's just kind of a piece of your application, and it may be weighted more highly or less significantly depending on, the different colleges and their policies.
I think timing, if you're taking senior year APs, will probably also play into it, because you'll be accepted, you'll have decided on schools by the time you're taking the AP exams. So I think you can send the scores in, but at that point, they're really just considering your first couple first semester of senior year AP grades. Right.
Yeah. And you'll be asked to report what you anticipate taking, in the spring of your senior year, but you will have likely already been accepted. You will have already been accepted into your schools before you take those tests. But again, if you are going to a school that you just need to look up the policy ahead of time, if you are going to a school that says, we will take this as credit, or we will place you out of, for example, I'll just give a very concrete example. I took the AP Calculus AB test in high school. I got a 4. The cutoff level was a 4 to get to basically place out of. I was pre-med at Dartmouth, and I was able to place out of the introductory calculus class that was a pre-med requirement at Dartmouth. They didn't give me a credit because that was their policy. So they said, okay, well, you still have to take another class. You still have to get a credit here, but I didn't have to take that class. So I was able to take a different type of class that I found a lot more interesting, honestly, than introductory calculus. So every college has their own policy. Not to spend too much time on this. You just need to look it up and figure out, what the importance or the weight that you are personally going to place on those AP exam scores.
Great. Awesome. Let's see. So how can a prospective pure math major stand out? Do you have any recommendations on classes or extracurriculars?
For that, you definitely want to max out the math curriculum at your school and then go beyond. You want to be doing competitive math through AMC and doing all of those competitions. It's a completely different kind of approach to math. There are a lot of competitive and really fun summer math camps that are offered that'll also expose you to new kind of fields and niche fields within mathematics. So it's important to be exploring those options and then to be thinking about either teaching opportunities, tutoring opportunities, research opportunities that you can be adding in as well. That'll make a compelling application.
Fantastic. All right. Someone else wants to know if it's true that applying to all 8 Ivy League schools is bad.
It depends on what you mean by bad. I would say maybe not useful. You want to be thinking about your why and what you're drawn to at each of the schools, not just that I want to go to an Ivy League school, so let me apply to all 8. If you have a compelling rationale and you've got an academic interest that can be met in a variety of Ivy League institutions, then sure, go for it. Recognizing that the odds are what they are. Recognizing, as we've talked about in other webinars, that you have the option to apply in November for either an early decision or restrictive early action at the Ivy Leagues that'll boost your admissions chances a bit. But there's, as I tell some of my students who are having a hard time deciding on their college list, you're going to be attending one school, and you don't necessarily need to get, you know, the honors of I've got into 6 Ivies. Well, you're going to attend one. And sure, maybe you want to apply to several in order to yield your best chances at being admitted into one. But very few students end up working through that as an application strategy. They might apply to 4, even 5, but the applications are very complicated, very involved, and you really need to have a clear rationale for why you're applying in order to submit a compelling and convincing application.
Fantastic. All right, and we have had a couple of questions, people asking if we're recording this webinar. It is recorded. We will be sending it out in the next couple of days, so you'll have access to the entire recording if you joined late. Let's see, do either of you have any thoughts on the CLEP test versus AP? Fine, either way. We can get back to you here with some individual advice with that question, and you can also sign up for a consultation to talk to our team, and they might be able to dive into that a little bit more with you.
Is it, Hallie, did you say the IB versus the AP? I couldn't quite hear you.
Sorry, the CLEP.
Oh, CLEP.
So the college level examination program. I think it's probably going to be dependent on each student's situation, but does very similar things as the AP does. Let's see. So for a student who's doing an IB program, does it make sense to do 1 or 2 AP courses on top of that?
I would say that some of my students have chosen to do that. Typically, it would be at a school that offers both, where you don't have to do that outside on your own. I think that the IB diploma program in and of itself is very highly respected by university admissions officials, and it's also very rigorous and demanding. So I think it's sufficient if you're doing the full diploma program to do that and focus on excelling in your HLs and try to get the maximum scores and predicted scores that you can. Really focus in on doing your theory of knowledge and your research methodology and your extended essay courses to the best of your ability, because that extended essay really gives you the opportunity to highlight your ability to do research as a high school student, and colleges pay attention to that in a way that the AP score, it's a number, it is a standardized measure, but it's qualitatively different from the IB program experience, in my view. That said, I have had students who elect to take some IB courses and some AP courses as they're going through their school's curriculum, where both of those are offered.
Fantastic. All right, and I think we have time for one more question. So how do you share standardized test scores, particularly if you have a perfect SAT or ACT score, with the UC schools who don't accept test scores and are test blind? Should you add them in the award section, or should you just not add them?
I think that there's no correct answer here. So I think maybe we will have differing opinions on this. I'm interested to hear what you have to say, but I'm speaking to this because I just was reading through the UC policy for another student. They don't want them, so don't shove them in their face, because they don't want to look at them, and they're making that very clear. So the way that I'm reading this is like, do not tell me what you got, because I don't care and I'm not going to look at it. And so just, I wouldn't submit it. What the policy is there for, there is one place where you can put in like your English score to show English language proficiency if you are an English learner, or English is not your first language of instruction. So if you're learning in a country that's not the United States, where most schools are happening in English. But yeah, other than that, don't try to sneak it in anywhere, because they don't want to look at them. And so I actually think that would potentially hurt you, because they would just be like, didn't you read the policy? So that's my take on this.
Yeah, and I agree. I have it on pretty solid authority that it's a bad idea. The UC applications have, or the UC system has decided that this is a value of theirs, that they recognize that there are barriers to excelling and standardized testing, that they value equity and equal access to education for the residents of California and out-of-state residents who are applying to the system. And you think of it, there's 225,000 undergraduate students in the University of California system, and a tremendous number of applications that come in every year that are going to be reviewed. They've decided to not review this based on their values. And so if you're going to try to make an end run around an institution's stated value of being test blind, it's not going to be well received. A couple years ago, the advice was, just sneak it in your essay somewhere, somehow, what's your, an achievement you're the most proud of, or a hurdle you've had to overcome, and you can work it into that narrative somehow. Our advice is to avoid doing that.
Thank you for answering that. And thank you for answering all these questions. I appreciate both of you taking the time to talk about applying as a STEM major and all the advice that you gave. And I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight for spending your evening with us. We will be sending out an email with this recording and some links if you want to sign up for a free consultation with our team and hear about how we can help you with your STEM school applications, or choosing extracurriculars, or finalizing your application if you're applying for next year. I hope everyone has a really great evening. Definitely reach out if you have questions. We're happy to answer them. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.